Refinement of Antichrist, Chapter 2, Trilogy by Natalia Foley, copyright 2025, all rights reserved. A crowd of the most influential people in the United States was gathering in the ballroom of Senator Backman's modest ranch house in Texas. The senator himself, an 85-year-old man who looked and acted more like he was in his early 50s, was full of energy, in excellent physical shape, and almost wrinkle-free. Strangely enough, his face showed no signs of the distortions often associated with repeated facelifts, unlike the overly tightened faces of many of his guests and their wives. Senator Backman was a legend in American politics, a unique figure who could not be replaced, though it seemed he had been in politics forever. Indeed, he had served as a United States Senator for the past 37 years. He stood firmly on the conservative wing of the Republican Party. Yet throughout his decades-long career, he remained one of the few unifying figures, someone who could speak with both Democrats and Republicans, and who could almost always find a way to bridge differences and reach some form of mutually acceptable solution. He was irreplaceable indeed, in that role. Perhaps this is why he was considered the most influential among the powerful elite in America, and arguably even in the world. Definitely so in the world, although most of the people surrounding him did not even realize the gravity of his unusual power, and yet the senator carried himself with remarkable humility. He always wore the same model of suit, the same dark blue color, the same double-breasted cut, made from the finest British wool. Today it was a suit of deep, rich blue, impeccably ironed, draping his nearly athletic frame with an elegance that could not be acquired, only inherited through blue blood. The senator was also wearing his usual white shirt made from delicate lawn fabric, which he used to change at least twice a day, and an extremely conservative yet chic tie made of perfect silk, dark blue with a silver gleam. Needless to say, neither the suit nor the tie nor even the shirt bore one of the major designer's labels. That would have been considered vulgar by the senator. Everything was handmade, professionally tailored by the best private tailors available, everything, including the shoes. The only item bearing a big-name designer's mark was his watch. However, it was excusable. The watch was a vintage piece from 1897. There were perhaps more expensive brigades, something newly made, a collector's edition, something starting from $1.5 million. But such a watch would not have been considered appropriate by the senator. Not that he couldn't afford that much for a watch, although honestly it might seem a bit excessive. No, the watch was not just a timepiece, it was a symbol. To him it was like a seal of royalty. His old-fashioned and in fact truly ancient-looking watch that had cost at most $150,000. But it was an inheritance, an attribute of maturity passed down in the family from the eldest son to the next older son. Must run in the family, he softly said, casting a glance at the watch. It was 5 p.m., time for an appointment he was anxiously expecting, which was unusual for him. He hadn't been anxious about anything for a long time, a very long time, actually. What did he have to be anxious about? A man who had pretty much everything he wanted, a perfect life, tremendous respect, the highest ranked position in the country, and really, almost unlimited power over matters of life and death that affected the entire world. At least that's how he saw himself. So, what could he possibly be anxious about? Strangely enough, the answer was simple. Only one thing still mattered to him, his personal internal issues. Not the fate of the planet, not the collapse of human civilization, not even his own life or death. He was anxious to know that his legacy would be continued by one of his children, that everything he had worked for his entire life would not sink into oblivion, his efforts, his achievements, which would only matter if they were not forgotten. Not by his colleagues, they didn't care, just as he didn't care about them, but by his children. That was the only thing that mattered. And it appeared to be an uncertain affair, for now. Senator Backman sat in his library, a lavish, antique-filled room with towering redwood bookshelves packed with extremely expensive, museum-quality ancient books bound in leather, their spines and titles gleaming with golden lettering. A fireplace stood on one side of the senator's desk, which was also an exquisite piece of redwood craftsmanship, its polished surface illuminated by the soft glow of a banker's green lamp. Altogether, the space exuded timeless elegance, stylish in the old-world way. A tall, elegant window adorned with deep red velvet curtains stretched along one wall, held in place by a golden rod. The senator sat alone at his desk, surrounded by this quiet, opulent beauty, visibly tense, but refusing to acknowledge his anxiety, not even to himself. Senator Backman glanced at his Breguet watch one more time. The visitor he was expecting was 57 seconds late. 2 seconds more and he would leave. If this were a regular appointment, that is, if it were a meeting requested by someone else. But in this case, the appointment had been requested by the senator himself, and no matter how much he hated to wait, he had no choice. The thought that he, Senator Backman, should be waiting for someone was almost disgusting. He angrily knitted his brow. Senator's secretary announces, "Senator Lord Zollinger." The senator replied, "Let him in." According to his Breguet, the guest, Lord Zollinger, was 59 seconds late, which, after all, was less than a minute and therefore excusable. Senator Backman decided not to show his displeasure. What's more, he resolved not even to feel it, and with that decision he smiled kindly, greeting his long-awaited visitor. Lord Zollinger greeted the senator with a respectful "sir." He clicked his heels, bent his neck, lowered his head, straightened up like a taut string, and froze in that military posture before Senator Backman, awaiting permission to continue. "Come on, Jeff," Backman said, welcoming Lord Zollinger with a hand gesture. The senator was clearly satisfied with the display of respect. "Sit down. Tell me, did you have the meeting?" he asked. Lord Zollinger exhaled with relief and took a seat in front of the senator. However, he was clearly uneasy, perched stiffly on the very edge of a massive antique armchair made of expensive leather and redwood. "Yes, sir," Lord Zollinger began his report. "I had the meeting. It went exactly as you expected." And he paused, trying to find the most accurate words, and even better. "How so?" The senator raised his right eyebrow. "Well," Lord Zollinger responded, "they accepted your offer. Furthermore, they provided sufficient guarantees that David—" Senator Backman made a gesture, pushing his open palm toward Lord Zollinger to stop him mid-sentence. The Lord immediately fell silent and simply nodded, confirming their mutual understanding of the unsaid words. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by an uninvited third party. It was Richard, the oldest son of Senator Backman, who had entered the room without his father's permission, now interrupting the senator's conversation with Lord Zollinger. "So, what about David?" Richard suspiciously asked Lord Zollinger instead of offering his greetings. Senator Backman and Lord Zollinger exchanged cautious glances, silently confirming that nothing damaging had been said within earshot of any unwanted listeners. Lord Zollinger spoke up. "May I leave now?" Senator Backman replied, "Of course you may go, my friend. Good job, Zollinger." The senator replied warmly, indicating the conversation was over. The senator added, and Zollinger proudly lowered his head in a kind of bow. Senator Backman continued, "I'll see you tomorrow in my office at 10 a.m. for a detailed report. And now, please enjoy the celebration." Lord Zollinger responded, "Oh, I certainly will." Lord Zollinger was now moving to the door, intending to leave. Suddenly, Richard closely approached Lord Zollinger and attempted to hug him, trying to prevent him from leaving. "Come on, Bill, I haven't seen you in forever and you're already leaving." But the Lord promptly avoided the trap. He escaped the hug and headed to the door, respectfully saying, "Sorry, Richard, I shall not interrupt your visit." With those words, Lord Zollinger politely smiled and quickly retreated. Senator Backman confronted Richard, asking, "What is that? Why did you interrupt my private meeting without my permission?" Richard smiled in response and nearly collapsed into the leather club chair in front of his father's desk. He looked drunk, or maybe he was just pretending to be. "Father, I don't need your permission. It's my home too, remember?" He pretended to be cheerful, dismissing his father's temper. Senator Backman stood up, clearly showing his displeasure, and moved toward the exit. Richard attempted to stop him, once again trying to hug, but his father, just like Lord Zollinger a few minutes before, avoided his son and left without saying a word. Richard now was alone in the quiet library. He dropped his hands apart as if making a gesture and said aloud, talking to himself, "Well, what can I do if you don't love me?" Then Richard took a few steps toward the window. His face wore a falsely sweet expression. "Can we at least be at peace today, Father?" "It's a big day," he said again, speaking to the emptiness of the room. Now Richard stood by the window, looking at the empty space at the desk where his father had sat just minutes earlier. His face expressed so much hatred that anyone who saw him would have been horrified. Richard dropped the mask of the merry drunk and became what he truly was, a greedy, envious, dangerous scoundrel. He sat in the chair that had been occupied by his father just seconds ago, then gazed at the spot where Lord Zollinger had been sitting moments before. With exaggerated seriousness, he mimicked his father's tone. "Good job, Lord. You may leave now." Then Richard frowned. "So, what was it about David?" Richard said to the emptiness. At that moment, the senator was moving quickly through the crowd in the ballroom, heading directly toward his grandson, David, who was standing next to his newlywed wife, Lisa, talking quietly, holding her hands and staring deeply into her eyes. How romantic, watching the happy couple. It wasn't that he doubted their feelings. Sentimental emotions of that sort just seemed too naive, too fictional to his rational mind. Finally, he approached David, who reluctantly let go of Lisa's hand. David exclaimed, "Grandpa, how great it is to have you here with us on this wonderful day." And then Lisa chimed in, "Oh yes, but perhaps the senator wanted to speak to you about something important." It was half question directed at the senator, half statement addressed to her husband. She looked at the senator and realized immediately that she was right. "Well, I'll step away for a moment if you don't mind." She softly touched David's hand, smiled at the senator and turned to leave. But the senator stopped her. She did it again, he thought. He just couldn't help it, but he admired her attitude so much that sometimes he felt jealous. Not that he was in love with her, oh no. If anything, perhaps he even hated her. For everything she was doing right now. It was so right that he hated it. For her almost regal carriage, for her intelligence, understanding, perfection. She did it again. She had outmaneuvered him. Even in this little episode, he had wanted to approach the couple. He had wanted to pull David aside for a moment. He had wanted to tell him how premature and potentially harmful this marriage could be to his future career. But now he couldn't do it. First, because it should have been him who took David aside, not her offering him the opportunity to talk to his own grandson with such elegant ease. Second, he wasn't even sure anymore about what he had intended to say. If he had had such a wife by his side when he married decades ago, perhaps his life would have taken a different turn. Although he wouldn't have wanted any outcome different from the one he achieved. After all, he had attained everything he had ever wanted, and even more than he could have ever dreamed. Still, if a woman like her had stood beside him, even those horizons might have been broader. Suddenly he felt it again. That furious envy, not toward the young, not toward their happiness, but toward the quality of the woman standing next to his grandson. And suddenly he realized that she had forced him to reconsider everything that only a moment ago had seemed so clear to him. He was confused. He wanted to think it over. And so he did the only thing he could do, the only thing he had always done. He followed his cold intellect, not his emotions. He followed the rational path. So he took Lisa's hand, kissed it kindly, and said, "I did want to talk to David. You're right, but there's nothing really urgent, so I won't interrupt your celebration. Please enjoy yourselves, Lisa. We are family now. My congratulations and best wishes." Then he released her hand, turned to David and added, "You are a very lucky man, David." For a change, it sounded almost candid. David smiled, watching the retreating figure of his famous grandfather. "I think he loves you," he said to Lisa. "I think he hates me," Lisa thought, but she said nothing and simply smiled back at David.